This is Africa International Network.
Professor Roger, Excellencies, and all distinguished guests and attendees. As Mr. Rådström pointed out, I am Joakim Rådström. I'm the media manager with the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. The background to me standing here and an attempt to an answer on the question of my presentation would be that IVA, as it's abbreviated in Swedish, 2 years or 1.5 used to run a highly appreciated seminar series on challenges and opportunities in Africa, especially within the areas of our main area, engineering sciences. So I briefly met with a few of the attendees here, for instance, Ambassador Ginga with the Rwandan embassy, and a few of the Tanzanian representatives. And I'm honored to be here, and it's with a big portion of humbleness that I give this presentation, because the real experts on African development are, of course, the representatives from the continent itself. But with that said, I would concur with the statement earlier that you are facing a very bright development future indeed, according to a lot of numbers. If we go to one of the main measuring, what should I say, scales, the Millennium Development Goals, we see, for instance, that Sub-Saharan Africa, along with, of course, other regions, have drastically decreased the amount of people living on less than $1.25 a day, but is still considerably higher than other regions. So a lot of things need to be done there. When it comes to education, I hope the picture is clear enough for you to see. It might be that we small letters here. Sub-Saharan Africa also there is making huge progress when it comes to achieve universal primary education as measured as primary completion rate. Also in promoting gender equality and empower women, I think that the case of Rwanda is a very hopeful one. With I think we have a very large proportion of women in parliament, for instance. 64%. That's very
wow.
Impressive for us all, I think. I'll tell any Swedish parliament member to go down there and learn a few things how to improve their record. Also, child mortality, under 5 mortality rate per 1,000 live births has decreased very rapidly. The best progress compared to all other regions. Still the highest number of under 5 deaths in the world, but with a very good progress rate. And closely related to that would be the 5th goal, improving maternal health, with the maternal mortality ratio decreasing quite rapidly. HIV/AIDS, there the picture looked very grim indeed just 10-15 years back, and it was partly due to a very slow response both in Africa and from the surrounding world. Not enough was really known about the disease until a very late stage, and not powerful enough measures were being taken until the death toll had gone up to alarming rates. But now, thanks to these new kind of medicines, we see a decrease, albeit quite slow. Ensuring environmental sustainability, not as fast an improvement there, but still. And this is, if we look at, I mean, all of the development goals have a large number of measures being combined within the goals themselves. And this is just one of them, the share of population with access to improved sanitation. And also the last development goal, and do keep in mind that these have recently been followed up now by the set of sustainability, what is the SDG, right? Sustainable development goal, thank you very much. But in hindsight, we can see that the last development goal has seen a very high increase also in internet users among Africans. And I'd say that if we were to look beyond 2013, the figure would increase exponentially, because internet usage in Africa is, really spreading. And with this in mind, I mean, starting from a low level in quite many different fields of development, but making huge progress all the same. Africa, of course, does face quite a few challenges. One would be the size. We tend to think of Africa as, one continent, and Africans, and as you know, they have one mindset, all of them, but nothing could be further from the truth. If we are looking at the continent, we can fill the entirety of China and India and USA, all of Eastern Europe except Russia, most of Western Europe, or all of it, I think, and Japan into the same continent. And if we try to look at what that means, if we look at the issue of Ebola, people used to be dead scared about going to Africa because of the Ebola threat a couple of years back. And if they only knew that the distance between, for instance, one of the hardest stricken cities, Monrovia, Liberia, that distance to, let's say, East and South Africa is larger than the distance to Sweden, then they should be dead scared about me going to Malmö. Aren't you afraid of going to Malmö? I mean, you can contract Ebola. But that goes with the picture of Africa as being just one single culture, or almost country, if you will. Another challenge would be lack of electricity. If you see this picture, is from McKinsey and Company, a huge consultancy. They have measured the relationship between electricity consumption and GDP, and as you can see, those of you who like reading graphs, it's quite fine relationship between GDP per capita and electricity consumption. So if you want growth, you need electricity. The one can't go without the other. And the only thing is that we need to, what should I say, cut the linkage between electricity consumption as being hazardous to the environment or to people's health when it comes to setting up your diesel generator or making fires with gathered wooden sticks, and instead invest in clean energy, which is happening rapidly in Africa, I'd say. But here are a few numbers. Excluding South Africa, the entire installed generation capacity in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, is only 28 gigawatts. In Sweden itself, it's 40 gigawatts. So that gives some perspective. The numbers are from 2013, so better today, but still. And of course, coming back to the issue of the Ebola, which we mentioned, why doesn't more things happen when it comes to Africa? Why don't more people go down there to make business, to go as tourists and thus contribute to the economy of Africa? Well, prejudices, ignorance, misconceptions, HIV/AIDS, probably not an misconception. I mean, the issue is huge, especially in southern part of Africa, but it has more and more come under control, and it's really a challenge for Africa itself, and nothing that should keep people away from going there. Poverty, of course, but as we saw on some of the first slides, poverty levels are decreasing in most parts of Africa, with the exception of a few conflict-stricken countries. Speaking of conflict, war and conflict, yeah, there has been quite a few number of wars and conflicts in Africa, but nothing compared to the history of Europe for sure, and not as dire a picture as if you look at large parts of the other part of the world. So yeah, that isn't something that should deter people from going there. Also, the question of terrorism, something that would prevent people from going to a country, but without them knowing that you face 10,000 chance of or risk to be killed in a car accident than being blown up by a terrorist. And as earlier mentioned, Ebola, but that has completely gone down and is supposed to be eradicated in West Africa. And theft, but not many of these challenges are so grim as people tend to believe. Corruption, I mentioned last. I think it is still a serious threat to African development. But I will also show another slide that makes even that picture a bit vaguer, a bit more difficult to just see as a truth. I can say a few words about what kind of relationships Sweden has with Sub-Saharan Africa today. And as I told Professor Bagge earlier, he will have to correct me as soon as I am out on deep water here. But what bothers me a bit is that, and that where I think that you as students and soon to be professionals within different fields, for instance business administration perhaps, can do something about is to change the trends in when it comes to historically low interest from the Swedish point of view in doing business with Africa. We've been there as development professionals, we've been there as tourists in some parts, we've been there in many different roles, but not yet as businessmen, and that's a shame. So just a few numbers. GDP per capita and GNI per capita is quite rapidly actually going up from 2010, 4,462 Swedish kronor from per capita up to, well, it has come down a bit in between 2014 and 2015, probably because of things like the oil market price and stuff like that. But still, and at the same time, trade in general, import and export, and if you look at the top graph, the green one, is very much on the same level. And that goes for goods especially, and so not services, because there isn't any such statistics available today. So we do have a few markets with which we trade more than with others. South Africa is quite a long-standing trading partner with Sweden. Nigeria to a lesser extent. Ethiopia coming stronger and stronger. When it comes to import, there is one very much bigger statistics that completely overshadows the rest of it, and that's the import of oil from Nigeria. So that's where you see these numbers. Yeah, I'll just swift through that. So when it comes to exporting, Sweden has so far quite much ignored sub-Saharan Africa, and when it comes to import, the figures are even lower still. So there is quite much we can do. China manages. China is there in soon to be every medium-sized African town. Should we meet their presence with targeted efforts? I'm up for it. I think we should, to some extent, with just keeping in mind that we're quite a small country. Stronger Swedish export support. I think also there a lot can be done. We have Business Sweden, we have Swedfund, we have EKN, the Swedish Export Credit Guarantee Council, and a few other actors, but they could have more harmonized efforts. Positive information, a lot can be done. Africa is not at all about only Ebola, HIV, poverty, war, terrorism. So much more. Negative information, that's another one. If we, I think to some extent that we should definitely threaten people with, if we don't go to Africa, come on government, if we don't start doing business with Africa, somebody else will, because these guys are, they are so creative, they are so entrepreneurial in many parts of Africa. So if Sweden doesn't come in that kind of a role, to do business and strengthen those efforts, somebody else will, and we will lose out on it. But I think this is what we need most of all. A few figures on corruption. The picture when it comes to Africa looks a bit grim. Many of the countries lie in the most corrupt part of the scale according to international transparency. But that said, it isn't something that should deter Sweden from doing business with Africa, because we are doing business with Russia to a large extent. 400 Swedish companies are present there. Russia was Sweden's 13th the biggest export market and 7th the biggest import. And the number of African countries that are less corrupt in Russia is quite a huge list. So, I mean, that isn't something that should deter us once again. I'll be very quick. I'll try to wrap it up. I just can't, not let you see a few of the figures that really emphasize how Africa has manifested itself when it comes to, improving the business climate, easing up different regulations and stuff like that. So it's easier to do business in Mauritius than in Spain, for instance. Easier to do business in Rwanda, Ambassador Nkulikinka's home country, and Botswana and South Africa than in China. Easier to go to Zambia or Namibia than to Philippines. And if you want to set up a business in Brazil or India, think again. You might want to do it in Kenya or Ghana if you're in for the ease of doing business aspect. And also when it comes to Sweden, with snaps and herring and whatever other atrocities there have been invited you to. Like Ambassador Rumviomboros, home country Burundi, it takes fewer days to set up a business there than here in Sweden. And the same goes with Rwanda, for instance, Senegal, and a few other countries. So with that, I hope that I have punctured a few myths and shed some light on a few development aspects in Africa. Thank you very much.